Welcome to Withdraw Consent. I'm Jack. Today we're doing another episode in our villain series and we're going to talk about Rudolf Hess. Okay? So this was the deputy Fuhrer in Nazi Germany, the Third Reich, fine, whatever, And basically there's another guy with a very similar name, but the last name is pronounced a little bit different. And he's the commandant of Auschwitz, the concentration camp. So this is not the same guy. This is the guy who flew the peace mission to Britain, right? And then he was imprisoned and tried at the Nuremberg trials for crimes against peace. Anyways, that actually happened. So we're just going to discuss this and see what the story is here. And I think it's kind of interesting because there's a lot of nonsense surrounding this. So let's just go through it. So the guy's born April 26, 1894 in Cairo, Egypt. Okay, so he studied business in Germany and Switzerland. Basically, at the onset of World War I, he enlisted in the 7th Bavarian Field Artillery Regiment. He became an infantryman and was awarded the Iron Cross second class. He transferred to the Imperial Air Corps after being rejected once, took aeronautical training, and served in an operational squadron at the rank of lieutenant. Okay, so they lost World War I, and then he was obviously embittered by how that happened. And we've talked before about the stab in the back theory and this and that. When you're there and experience it, it's much different than when people lie to you in history books and say that it didn't actually happen. When everybody there knew it happened, It's kind of funny, the historian saying, well, I know better than everybody who was actually there and actually got stabbed in the back. They didn't get stabbed in the back. So whatever. Anyways, after the war, Hess went to Munich and joined the Freikorps. Okay, so we talked about those in an episode which I'll link below, and it's called Fem Murders 400 Assassinations. And it covers this private army that was made. And the numbers are striking. There was like 1.5 million people in it. And there did over 400 political assassinations because all these people were just betraying Germany in their little fake Weimar Republic government that they had set up to get the things that the Allied powers from World War I wanted, like the reparations and all this stuff that were just unachievable, So basically, he commanded an SA battalion for Hitler during the Beer Hall Putsch. And so that got him a lot of respect. So he was with Hitler very early, and he served 7.5 months in Landsberg prison with Hitler. Hitler dictated Mein Kampf to him, right? They were very close. And basically, after Hitler became chancellor in January 1933, Hess was appointed deputy Führer of the Nazi Party in April. He was elected to the Reichstag in the March elections, was made a Reichsleiter of the Nazi Party in June, and in December 1933, he became minister without portfolio in Hitler's cabinet. He was also appointed in 1938 to the Cabinet Council and in August 1939 to the Council of Ministers for Defense of the Reich. Hitler decreed on the outbreak of war on 1st September 1939 that Hermann Göring was his official successor and named Hess as next in line. In addition to appearing on Hitler's behalf at speaking engagements and rallies, Hess signed into law much of the government's legislation, including the Nuremberg laws of 1935. So if you're in a dictatorship and you can actually sign legislation into law, you're pretty high up there. Okay, so basically, when the war started in 1939, though, basically what they were saying there, where Hermann Göring was the official successor, and then Rudolf Hess was number 3. He got less and less attention because he wasn't really involved in the war. And so since the war was existential to the future of this political movement in Germany, the people who were involved with the war became more important, like Hermann Göring, right? And so then Hess was put on the back burner because he was less involved in the war, which is funny because this is why he's going to be tried at the Nuremberg trials later, right? So we've covered the Nuremberg laws of 1935 too, and basically what happened is the Germans got together with the Jews and they said, hey, let's clearly define what is Jew and what is German. And so then they both, the Jews were like, hey, but in order to be a Jew, you have to be from the maternal branch because that's how, they work. And the Germans said, hey, in order to be a German, you have to be this percentage German. So they decided on, like in the United States, they were doing the 1 drop rule. So the 1 drop rule is if you have 1 drop of Indian blood in you, you're not white, which is a rough standard, we'll say, right? But in Germany, they said you could have 1 grandparent who's Jewish. So you could be 25% Jewish and you're just still German, Or I guess you could have one. I don't know how they said it. If you could have one grandparent of anything else either. I don't know. But basically, they make them like the Nuremberg laws of 1935. They say that they were like this harsh thing where like these Germans were imposing on Jews. No, they were mutually fixed by the Jews and the Germans. So anyways, let's talk about what he did to get arrested, okay? So Hess flew to Britain in May 1941 to meet the Duke of Hamilton and Brandon, parachuting from his Messerschmitt Bf-110 over Renfrewshire. You think German words are hard, these British ones. On May 10th and landing, though breaking his ankle, at Fuhrer's Farms near Eaglesham, just south of Glasgow. He was quickly arrested. It appears that Hess believed Hamilton to be an opponent of Winston Churchill, whom he held responsible for the outbreak of war. His proposal of peace included returning all of Western European lands conquered by Germany to their own national governments, but German police would remain in position. Germany would also pay back the cost of rebuilding these countries. In return, Britain would have to support their war against Russia. Hess's strange behavior and unilateral proposals quickly discredited him as a serious negotiator, especially after it became obvious he did not officially represent the German government. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. We have an episode, I'm going to link it below, but it talks about Hitler's peace proposals that he did. And if you haven't been watching the show and you just watch some mainstream stuff, you might not know about this. But Hitler did over 24 peace treaties to Britain, right? And there was this time, and it was Yalta or something. I can't remember which conference it was. It was very late in the war. And Stalin told Churchill, he said, why don't you ask Germany if they want peace? And then Churchill laughed and he said, because they would accept it, right? So even though they did start the war, and we've talked about the reasons for them starting the war, the Germans were always the ones who wanted peace, and everybody else was the ones who didn't want peace. And so this article is written by somebody who doesn't know history very well at all, right? Because it says here, Hess's strange behavior and unilateral proposals quickly discredit him as a serious negotiator, right? Because if you read this historically and you look at okay, let's look at the things he said, okay? He said his proposal of peace included returning all of the Western European lands conquered by Germany to their own national governments, but German police would remain in position. So he's going to give back all of France, because remember, the French still have Vichy France, southern France. He's going to give back all of France, and he's going to give back Belgium and Holland, right? And so, because those are the Western lands, they would keep German police there. Germany would also pay back the cost of rebuilding these countries. I mean, this is insane. When World War I ended, Germany was charged, the winners of the war, the Entente powers, the Allies, charged Germany with rebuilding everything. Everything had to be rebuilt by Germany. Germany said, we've now won this war in France and the West, but we as the winners will rebuild everything. It's absolutely insane that that's such a good deal, right? In return, Britain would have to support their war against Russia because communism was the main enemy, right? But and then they say it's unilateral proposals, quickly discredit him. But you also look at Hitler's peace treaty, which you covered in the episode I put below, but it's as soon as he conquered France, he immediately said, hey, I'll give France back immediately. Let's stop the war. I'll give France back, and here's what I want. I want a couple colonies that you took from me in World War I that are in Africa. I want those back. You know, he said, Britain owns the sea. But since Germany is now recognized as the strongest continental power, the Wehrmacht, which is the German army, will come to the aid of Britain anywhere around the world at any call that they give, you know, because they're the land force and Britain's the navy force. And so they gave these just very incredibly good offers, which they're recorded in history, but you're not taught them when you're in school. And so like this guy who's writing this didn't know that all those existed. So when he hears the really good deals that Hess is offering, he's like, the Nazis would never really want peace or that's the only side that does. So this is ridiculous. Anyways, but we're also going to talk about, there's this idea. I did an episode on this. This is a really long time ago. So you probably haven't seen it unless you've been watching from the very beginning. But it's about the leadership principle. I'll put a link below. It's called the Fuhrer principle. Fuhrer principle, which is the leadership principle. And basically they had this thing where everybody is supposed to work towards the will of the Fuhrer, right? And so you listen to what the leader says, and then you try to make that thing happen, right? So like there was this example, and it was regarding abortions, right? And so they said that you should have an abortion. The Germans did, or the National Socialists, they said you should have an abortion if your child has congenital diseases that they'll pass on to their children, just certain things like that, right? Massive disability, mental impairment, stuff like that, that just makes them like they're not a positive to the society, they're a negative. You should have a abortion, right? So then basically Germany's conquered, and in the part that this happened, the American soldiers went and took over the hospital and all that, but the hospital's still functioning, because people still are having babies, doing different stuff. And it's illegal under the Americans to give an abortion, right? Or to follow but the doctors inside were still following the will of the Fuhrer. And they were still aborting babies with congenital diseases, which would be bad for the population long-term from a logical perspective, not a moral perspective, but with American soldiers standing right outside who had forbidden them to, because they were working towards the will of the Fuhrer. So basically, you could say, when you're looking at this story, that this guy, Rudolf Hess, he may or may not have been told by Hitler to do this. Probably not, I would assume, because he had fallen out of favor a bit. He wasn't at the fore of the group. He wasn't in the innermost circles. And so then he sought to get back in the inner circles by following the will of the Fuhrer, which is doing what the Fuhrer wanted, which was peace. So I think he went on this peace mission by himself, okay? So when it happened, Hitler disavowed that he had sent him, which I pretty much believe is true. It might not be, but I believe that Hitler did not send him, right? But he also gave Rudolf Hess's wife a lifetime pension, right? Which the Rudolf Hess's service to his country was absolutely enormous, absolutely enormous. And so basically they imprison him in England, and they want to know if he has any military information. So they check him. He's not involved in the military stuff. So he doesn't have much by the British's own account, he doesn't have much military information from him. So he's not very valuable to him. And he's going to get tried at the Nuremberg trials for doing military stuff, which British just said he didn't do anything of, and he was in the outer circle. Okay, whatever, The Nuremberg trials were an absolute joke. And so if you think any of that stuff has anything related to reality, you just haven't read history. Okay, so he was given 4 counts. He was found guilty on 2 counts. The first one is crimes against peace, specifically planning and preparation of aggressive war, which he was not involved in by the British account, his own account, historian's account, whatever. This is just such nonsense. And conspiracy with other German leaders to commit crimes. He was found not guilty of war crimes or crimes against humanity. So they're not saying that he actually was involved in any of the plans, but he did conspire to commit them, right? His last words before the tribunal were, quote, "I have no regrets," end quote. The guy was awesome, okay? So basically, he did this thing where he pretended to act insane, right? He did this whole role, and then it may have been genuine, it may not have been genuine. There's conflicting reports on it, but he was going to this trial, and it was it would have been a good strategy to try to get not convicted, maybe. But the problem is, at the end of the trial, he basically laughed and said he had been faking it the whole time, just to make a mockery out of them. But that also then removed that as a defense at the trial for if you were trying to go for like clinical insanity or something. And they checked his mental health, and they always said that it wasn't an actual mental insanity that he had. It was stresses from the entire situation that's going on and all this. Okay, so basically he's in prison to life in prison. Most of the people at the Nuremberg trials were executed. Some were given sentences, like Albert Speer, the architect, who was later put in charge of military production. He got 20 years in Spandau, which is the name of the prison. It's in Berlin, right? And they had rotating controls by what they call the 4 powers. And so the 4 powers were the United States, England, France, I believe, and for sure the USSR. And so it would rotate who controls it. And then, there was these high-level Nazi prisoners in there, or National Socialist prisoners, whatever. And basically, Then like 20 years go by and Albert Speer gets released. And then basically it ends up that there's only one person in the entire prison. And it's just Rudolf Hess sitting in this prison by himself, and the warden hangs out with him. And then the warden writes a book about the loneliest man in the world, It's a pretty sad story. So in 1977, Britain's chief prosecutor at Nuremberg, whose name is Sir Hartley Shawcross, characterized Hess's continued imprisonment as a, quote, scandal, end quote. So what happens is every period of years, it didn't really say exactly how many, but there's a chance, should we release him or should we keep him in the prison? He's the only guy there, And every time Britain votes to release him, and every time the USSR votes to keep him imprisoned, okay? So then basically Gorbachev comes to power. And Britain still has to say, for political reasons, yes, we want to release him. But now they're afraid that Gorbachev may say, yes, release him. But Britain doesn't really want him released. He should be released if they were a decent country. And so they're taking the part of a good country, that they're playing that role in the play. But they're not actually a good country. So basically, Rudolf Hess hangs himself to death. And then that's it. He hangs himself. He's at the age of 93. And it's probably not that. So chances are very high that he was assassinated. Basically, let me read you this. His son, Wolf Rudiger Hess, who openly admired Adolf Hitler, maintained until his own death that his father was murdered by British SAS soldiers. According to Wolf, the British had always voted for freeing Hess while knowing the Russians would overrule it. But then Gorbachev came to power. This became less likely, thus the need to kill Hess. So basically the theory around this is, so they find out that he's dead, and his doctor comes rushing in. And his doctor his name is Abdul or something, I forget. So it sounds like a not very German name, but he's been taking care of him. He comes running in, finds him hanging, and there's 2 American soldiers there. And because of the rotation schedule, this is very not likely. And they basically decide that these are MI6 agents, the doctor, the son, and all these people who are looking into this. So he at the time, he was 93, okay? He had arthritis so bad that he couldn't tie his own shoes, but he could tie the rope around his neck and kill himself, right? His suicide note was obviously forged. They knew his handwriting. They had been literally sitting here writing letters back and forth half of this dude's life at 93, and they know his handwriting. The suicide note was forged. They did an autopsy and it said it's fine, it's just, he just hung himself, So the family hired a second doctor to do an autopsy. And the autopsy report from there decided, yes, he died from strangulation, but not from hanging. Like a pull back strangulation, not a pull up strangulation, like if he was hung. And basically he died at the age of 93 in 1987. Okay. So that's this guy's story. And when we're looking at whether he was a hero, a villain, or somewhere in between, okay, I think, he started his life very well. And he did good. He was doing his business. He joined World War I, became a pilot, and he joined the Freikorps, so he's politically active, and he wants what's best for Germany, And then he gets in with this party that comes to power and all this. And him not being involved from the war absolves him and anything related to concentration camps, right? Because those are the main reasons why you would, if you just read common history books that just fill you with propaganda, the main reasons you would say you dislike National Socialist Germany is because of the war and the concentration camps. And he's not involved in either of those, but his major thing is attempt at peace. So I'm going to say he's a complete hero. The hero doesn't have to succeed. And sometimes, like we talked about in the Martin Luther King Jr. one, where the person is a scoundrel of a human being, but they are a hero because they succeed at some heroic endeavor. If a good person attempts a heroic endeavor, in this case, I think you can be put in the hero column. Just imagine. Okay, so the guy in World War I, he learned to fly planes, and when he flew that measurement, he flew it by himself. So he flew across the channel into enemy territory, to go on this mission of peace. It's really an amazing story. Just imagine a vice president of any country throughout history, and this is a prominent one who's at war. But I just can't even fathom like that would ever happen in any world. I just can't think of an example of anything even close to this. So I think it's interesting. Obviously, there's millions and millions of people who wish he would have succeeded, and families thereof. And so I think he's a terrific dude. I think it was interesting to learn about his history. That's what I got for you. Anyways, hopefully you guys have a great weekend. See you next time.